A question I often get asked whenever I share my art online is, where do I find my inspiration, or where do I get my ideas from? This is a really good question with multiple layers that I could talk about for hours and hours on end, as it is something I am very passionate about. For now though, I will focus on this. Inspiration is everywhere if you look closely enough. In this video, I will be sharing with you how to metaphorically open your eyes to notice and how to use your curiosity to spark inspiration. If this is the first video of mine that you're watching, hi, welcome. My name is Aiko and I'm an illustrator based in the Netherlands. I illustrate within the publishing industry. I have my own small business where I sell my art. And on social media, I share my creative journey and behind the scenes tidbits as a full-time artist. Today I'm taking you with me on a walk and show you how I used this little adventure as inspiration for several drawings that I made within my sketchbook. Let's start at the beginning. The definition of inspiration is someone or something that gives you ideas for doing something. In this case, the doing something is to make art about it, in whatever way you desire, of course. Sometimes when it comes to creativity, it can help to create some sort of boundary, restriction for yourself to help you make decisions. Otherwise, the options of what to make are endless, which can feel very overwhelming and can lead to choice paralysis. So let's start by creating some restrictions for ourselves. On this day I made these. I only wanted to make art of things that I saw around me with the supplies that I brought with me. Knowing I was going to walk through nature for a large part of the day, I brought a few selected art supplies with me that together made for an easy drawing time and picked a limited color palette to work with. That's another restriction. If I wanted to color something and I didn't have that color with me, I would have to use my imagination and creativity to fill in the blanks, aka to solve the problem of the color in another way, so to say. Other than that, I went into this walk without many expectations. I did my best to notice what caught my eye and make a special note of these things. And that's the fun thing. If everyone would take the same walk that I did on this day, we would all notice different things and each of our walks would be entirely unique. One cannot notice everything around them, but one can take note of things our eyes tend to fall upon and recognize a pattern. If you're having trouble with this, you can set out and look for specific things. A few years ago, when I was still a student, I also went out for a walk in the forest with a mission in mind for a school project. And my mission was to look for tracks or signs of life. I wrote down everything I saw, from small bites out of leaves where a caterpillar might have had their lunch, to dog paws in the mud, to burrows of mice, and to finding the most exciting discovery of seeing a tree that a beaver had been chewing on. Without this set mission that I set for myself, I might have not actively looked for these things, so it felt really special to discover them. And I might not have seen the animals themselves, but they left clues behind that they were there. And that's when the next exciting part takes place. Curiosity. These tracks made me wonder what led them up to that point where they left their mark. Who were these animals and where were they now? I could already see the beaver going back to their home after a long day of chewing and drink up a cup of tea on its handmade beaver couch. Or the caterpillar now being a butterfly blending in with the flowers. As I illustrate picture books, my brain quickly tends to go downwards the storytelling route whenever I ask myself these questions. Though, taking these same examples, you can also take them down another route. Seeing the teeth marks of the beaver in the tree in and of itself could be interesting as a background pattern, for example. Or the negative space the caterpillar left behind could also be used to write something out, as if it were a font. And with what art supplies could I replicate these things? All these small elements and questions are leading you down a path of curiosity. And what makes you curious tends to be what you're interested in. It reflects who you are in a way. Again, this can be so different for everyone. All these questions can differ per person, even with the same subject matter. Inspiration is following up on these curiosities. It is figuring out how you can replicate the negative space on the leaf left behind by the caterpillar, playing around with your art supplies until you have made something that you're satisfied with. A little experiment. How will this look? What if I added this? That's inspiration in its purest form. To notice, to question, to follow up on. However, that might all sound very fun and easy, but being curious can be difficult. Many of us grew up in a school system where curiosity after a certain point would be discouraged. We were taught to listen to what the adults had to say and to do what you were told. And if we asked too many questions, we were told we were disruptive. Some have experienced this more literally than others, but I hope you get the point I'm trying to get across here. That's why very young children are often so creative. They haven't received that message yet, to be discouraged to ask questions. They want to know everything. They ask hundreds of questions and they make connections that to us sometimes might seem illogical. They are all figuring out how the world works, and it's such a big and fun and scary and curious place. And to be fair, aren't we all still doing that? Now that we're older, we just stopped asking as many questions. But fret not, curiosity is something that we can find back. I really struggled with curiosity and this concept for a while. We had an artist come by to give a talk at our art school about why you should be curious and how it's one of the most important aspects of being an artist. And I remember sitting there, agreeing, but thinking that I wasn't a very curious person. I just didn't care enough about anything to be curious, I felt like. And I was actually really upset about it. That thought sounded so depressing to me, but what could I do about it? Thankfully, it ended up being a lot easier to find back my curiosity than I thought. I even felt like a little rebel following my curiosity sometimes. For example, I'm dyslexic. The school system made me feel like I was bad at reading and that this thing just wasn't for me. Just give up, do something else. However, I noticed I loved stories and storytelling, especially within my art. I wanted to know more about stories and get better at telling them. And one of the largest resources for stories were books. I noticed I was curious about all the secrets these books held that I felt like I wasn't allowed to discover. So, the little rebel that I was, I decided to pick up a book. And when that one was done, I was curious about this other one, and so on and so on. Of course, the thought that I wasn't allowed to read books was a blockade that I made up in my mind by social conditioning that I had to push through in order to become more curious again. I became more aware of what piqued my interests and tried following up on them. And the more I did this, the easier it got. If you struggle with finding your curiosity, I suggest this. Make a list of things you like. This can be anything. And ask yourself, why do you like them? For example, why do you like the movies that you like? What do these have in common? And try to follow up on any further question that you might get. You will become more aware of your interests and can build your web of curiosities out further and further. Now, to go back to the walk that I went on, I captured things around me that piqued my interests in a way. Funny shapes, contrast between light and darkness, color combinations I found beautiful, animals doing their things, and different kinds of anomalies. I ended up drawing most of the art back when I went home, in my own comfortable space where I had the time to sit with what I had seen and start experimenting. Each thing that I wanted to explore further, I also put some kind of restraint on. I wanted to study the colors of the flower with the acrylic markers that I had available. I wanted to capture the contrast of the branch above the water, and here I made a value test with a limited color palette to study contrast. The horse and the dove are my personal favorites of the day. Shocker, the animal drawings are my favorite. Who would have guessed? For the horse, I mostly focused on the composition, making the eye lead to the horse while you could still see the setting around it. And for the dove, it was mostly an observation in contrast again, that scratched the itch in my brain just the right way. And yeah, that's how I use the environment around me for inspiration. There are still so many aspects of inspiration that I haven't touched upon yet, and I'm thinking of turning this topic into a series. I have now talked about inspiration, close around you, tangible in the real world, though You can find inspiration in art books, community, art supplies, your past, history in general, non-art related hobbies, etc. And I would love to talk about all of these topics in the future and help you find inspiration more easily. Let me know if you'd be interested in that and if you have any specific suggestions or questions. For now, if you're looking for a bit more inspiration, I would love to show you my latest sketchbook that you can watch over here. Or if you're curious on how I approach the illustration process from the very first idea to the final drawing, you can check out this video here, where I go in depth into my art process. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye bye!